have to fear is
In war, there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power."
And that's what we're doing here on Thursdays on WallBuilders Live, informing our discretion. We're getting educated about the founding principles of America. Welcome to WallBuilders Live with David Barton, Tim Barton, and Rick Green. In today's program, we're actually going to talk about those principles being taught in our schools. Can you imagine, David, not just doing this on Thursdays? Tim, we could actually do this in schools. Wait, teach the founding of the country in schools.
That might be a little bit too much. Our kids have a lot of other things going on, and learning the Constitution and principles of freedom, I don't know if we could handle that.
And by the way, come on, Rick. I mean, the guys who wrote the Constitution, they rode horses. They didn't know what internet was.
And they had those funny-looking wigs,
yeah,
too.
And nothing relevant. I mean, what they
and
did...
high pants and stockings, how embarrassing.
Yeah, oh, yes, exactly. So,
and if we're teaching the good stuff about the founding of the country, then that makes it hard to also be, telling all this bad stuff, because then the kids might get confused. It's probably better if we just keep only teaching the bad stuff.
Well, that's true, because I said it wrong, because we do teach the founding fathers in school. We teach how much of womanizers they were, and how many racists and bigots there were, and how that they were atheists and agnostics and deists, and how that they were all a bunch of wealthy landowners, and how that every problem in the world has stemmed from these founding fathers. So I forgot, we do teach the founding fathers in school, but as you point out, nothing good about them, and we have to make up bad things about them, quite frankly. Nah, I can't say that. What they did, they don't make it up. They take the exception, make it the rule. Whereas you'll have someone like a Ben Franklin or an Alexander Hamilton who was involved in an affair, and they will impute that to all 250 founding fathers. Or they will take someone like a Henry Dearborn or a Charles Lee or a Thomas Paine, who was not very religious. They'll impute that to the 250 founding fathers. They'll take a handful of slave owners and say all founders owned slaves. So what they'll do is they'll give the bad and the ugly, but never do they give the good. And that's the way history is supposed to be taught, is the good, the bad, the ugly, and we don't get that in schools.
Or, as Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story. Because for many of the guys who owned slaves, they were fighting to free their slaves. Or Ben Franklin, who really seemed to repent and change over time. But we never hear the rest of the story. We might look at the one moment, even the things like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, where people talk about them being irreligious, or they said this or said that. Well, you're looking at one moment of their life. You're not looking at the entirety, where the rest of their life they said the completely opposite thing. And so what we do is we take a snapshot of the bad and the ugly, and we assume that's their whole life, or we ascribe it to all the other founding fathers instead of learning the rest of the story.
Well, and the opposition to that is just vehement. I mean, when you bring up these good things and you bring out these documents and the rest of the story, I mean, they get upset. You've seen it at our own State Board of Education in Texas and in other states. When you get involved in these textbooks and try to get the good stuff in, man, they go crazy.
Well, one of the great examples just happened is in Colorado, because in Colorado, State Board of Education up there outside of Denver said, look, the textbooks are filled with so much bad and ugly, but that's not a true representation of what America is. There's been so much good that's come out of here. So many nations have copied the good things we've done.
Now, you said State Board, but you meant local school board, right?
Excuse me, it was the local school board. And so the local school board there outside of Denver said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to teach what we're teaching American history, but we're going to add some of the good stuff back in. It's time to teach the good stuff. And the headline is that the students in that school left the school, boycott the school. They protest because they don't want to be taught the good stuff about America. Now, why would the kids make that an issue? Because the teachers walked out of school and said, we will not teach the good things about America. And the kids walked out with the teachers to support their teachers. So there's your pretty good reflection. Just because they're asked to teach some good things about America too, the teacher said no, and the kids sided the teachers. So that kind of tells you what the philosophy of education is. It's really hard to maintain a constitutional America if you don't know the good things that the Constitution has done.
Well, if we do that, though, then people might actually be proud to be Americans. They might actually study the founding principles, and they might actually vote that way, and they might actually be for things like private property and free enterprise and constitutional principles, and that could create a problem.
Limited government, inalienable rights, individual rights. Oh, you can't have government wouldn't have as much to do if all that were to happen. So we can't let that occur.
Well, so you had mentioned when we saw this article that a great person to get some perspective on this and what was happening out there would be Dr. Everett Piper. We've actually had him at our legislators conference. Does a great job at getting perspective on these issues.
Yeah, he is the president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, really, really, really good school, and he is so ardent about teaching the right things. You teach the good, the bad, the ugly. You don't gloss it over, but you don't hide the good stuff just because you're fixated on the bad and the ugly. And so he is so rigorous in his academics there at Oklahoma Wesleyan. Thought, here's a really good guy to comment on this because he sees the kids that come out of this kind of teaching and what he has to do when they get to the university level.
He's going to be with us when we come back from the break. Dr. Everett Piper, he's the author of Why I'm a Liberal and Other Conservative Ideas. Stay with us right here on WallBuilders Live.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In the case Abingdon versus Shemp, the Supreme Court ruled that the Bible could no longer be an independent textbook in public school curriculum. Would our founding fathers have agreed? Benjamin Rush certainly would have disagreed. Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was a leading educator of the day. In fact, he was the first founding father to call for free public schools. Benjamin Rush declared, "The great enemy of the salvation of man, in my opinion, never invented a more effective means of extinguishing Christianity from the world than by persuading mankind that it was improper to read the Bible at schools. The Bible should be read in our schools in preference to all other books." In the view of founding father Benjamin Rush, the Bible was the textbook of preference for public schools.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Our guest today is Dr. Everett Piper. He's president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, also author of Why I'm a Liberal and Other Conservative Ideas. Dr. Piper, Oklahoma Wesleyan does a great job of raising up young people that understand the foundation of our country and why it's important to teach those things. We appreciate so much what you do there at the university. Appreciate you taking time to be with us today.
Thanks, Rick. I'm honored to join you. Thank you.
Well, what you guys are doing, it seems maybe a local school district in Colorado would like a little piece of that, actually teaching truth and teaching patriotism and teaching some of those positive aspects of America. And the community is outraged that they would want to actually teach that part of American history. And David said, man, let's get Dr. Piper on. Let's find out what he has to say about this.
I'd be happy to comment a bit. Do you want to lead me on this, or you want me to jump in?
Well, what does that say to you? If the school district, from what I understand, they're not talking about sugarcoating things. They're just saying, hey, here's a bunch of things that we've basically left out in our history education as we've gone to this kind of negative, America's evil and done everything wrong, and not talked about the good things that America's done. And they're just trying to get a balance there and get the good stuff back in. That's the way I've from what I've read in the articles and different things that I've seen. I haven't actually read their curriculum, but that's what seems like to me. Isn't that what we want to do in our schools?
Yes, and actually I think I think this is an opportunity for us to reflect on, as conservatives, what kind of language and what kind of strategy, what kind of vocabulary, how do we want to communicate in the midst of these situations and these controversies? And I actually think there's a way to win these things easily. For example, if you want to encourage your local school board and your local school system to be more robust and be more classically liberal, I use that word intentionally.
Yeah.
If you want to encourage people to pursue truth and to accept it wherever it leads. See, these are phrases. This is language that the progressives enjoy.
Yes.
In other words, if you want to be inclusive, if you want to be tolerant of all ideas, if you want to pursue what's right and just and true, if you want justice, if you want to be classically liberal, then surely you would want to include some alternative ideas in the debate, wouldn't you?
That's great, man.
Now,
That is powerful.
What progressive is going to tell me no?
Right.
I think there was a strategic error in the way this board proposed its curriculum. I think if we use the language of the left that they have co-opted, quite frankly, from us, it's our language. We need to reclaim it, and I think we can actually win some of these debates. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. That is so powerful, and I think you're spot on. I do the same thing. I fall into the language that our side tends to use now, which the other side has branded and doesn't work with the middle anymore. And so what you're suggesting is, hey, go back to the original language of conservatism that the liberals have co-opted, and if we use that, we're not changing our value. You're not suggesting changing the values or changing what you're actually proposing for the curriculum to teach, just how you promote it.
Absolutely, and how robust and inclusive and complete do you want your curriculum to be? And I don't know any progressive who's going to say, we want an incomplete curriculum. We want a less than fully robust curriculum. We want an intolerant curriculum. So use the language to your advantage and trust the truth to win. If we believe that there's truth with a capital T, we need to trust it to win. I'm not afraid to enter a debate because I know the truth can win if I have a grasp of it. And I know my adversary probably doesn't even believe in it, and therefore he's at a disadvantage.
Oh, that is so powerful. Okay, so we're going to put together a one-day seminar with all school board conservatives around the country and have you come in and coach them on this. I mean, seriously, that is exactly what we need to do more of. Is that a lot of what you do at Oklahoma Wesleyan in terms of this next generation you're raising up, teaching them how to be wise in how they communicate?
Well, I think we need to challenge each other to think more clearly and to communicate clearly as the result of that. Ideas have consequences. Richard Weaver, 1948. The ideas we embrace will lead us somewhere. Bad thinking and bad ideas will lead us to bad places, bad culture, bad corporations, bad church, bad community. Good ideas will lead us to good places. We need to understand that there are consequences to our ideas. Ideas that are grounded in God's immutable truths, His unchanging, time-tested truths, will work. Because time has proven over and over again, history has demonstrated that those ideas actually lead to freedom, and that the bad ideas lead to bondage. Pol Pot and Mao and Robespierre and Chavez and Hitler and Mussolini had ideas. They were bad. They led to bad places. It's this kind of conversation we can win. That's why I challenge Common Core, for example. Why would we want to have a common education? Don't we want an exceptional education? Again, do you recognize the use of words here?
Yeah.
Why would we want to dumb down the curriculum to commonality? Wouldn't we want to challenge the scholar to pursue those things that are good, exceptional, right, and just and true? None of those are common ideas. None of those are average ideas. Those are the good and exceptional ideas. Reclaim the language, and we win.
Dr. Piper, I want everyone in the country to read what you write. What's the best place to go to get your articles, your book, all of those things? This is exactly the kind of teaching we need in order to reclaim the exceptionalism of America.
Okay, I'll give you a couple places. You can follow me at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, and that's www.okwu.edu. I Twitter, whatever you think. What's that, past tense or present tense? I don't know. I use Twitter. And then my handle is Dr. Everett Piper. That's DREVERETTPIPER. I write for the Okie Blaze. You can Google that and follow me on a weekly column there, or the Examiner Enterprise in Bartlesville. You can follow my weekly columns there.
Great stuff. Great
and
stuff.
My book, Why I'm a Liberal.
And is that the best place to go for Why I'm a Liberal?
Just Google it, Amazon. You can pick it up there.
Okay, excellent. Why I'm a Liberal and other conservative ideas. And Dr. Piper, we'll do links for all of those on our website, wallbuilderslive.com. today. God bless you, brother. Keep up the great work there. So excited about what your university is doing, what you're doing to help educate folks and get us back to these great foundations. And we appreciate your time today coming on WallBuilders Live.
Likewise to you. Thank you.
That's Dr. Everett Piper. Back in a moment with David Barton.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In several decisions over recent years, the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that it is unconstitutional for the government to encourage religion. Did our founding fathers agree with this? Consider the words of Henry Laurens, a signer of the Constitution and a president of Congress. Henry Laurens declared, "I had the honor of being one who framed that Constitution. In order effectually to accomplish these great ends set forth in the Constitution, it is especially the duty of those who bear rule to promote and encourage respect for God and virtue, and to discourage every degree of vice and immorality." Founding Father Henry Laurens believed that the goals of the Constitution could not be fulfilled apart from a fear and a respect for God, and that it was therefore the duty of government to encourage this among the people.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Samuel Adams said, "The liberties of our country and the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending against all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday, and special thanks to Dr. Everett Piper for his time and coming on today. Wow, guys. I mean, you were, David, I knew he was good on these issues and articulate on them, but man, what a brilliant way to turn the whole thing and use the left's language, which is really our language, as he was saying, but use what they have co-opted to say, look, you ought to be teaching these things and being inclusive in this way. That was powerful the way he put it.
Yeah, it was. And listen to what he said. He said, pursue truth. Tell them you want to pursue truth. Tell them you want to be more classically liberal. You want to be more inclusive. You want to include alternative ideas in the debate. That's their rhetoric. And that's what we do. And if you go in the direction of telling the good, bad, ugly, that's exactly what you get out of it. And I love the way he said use their rhetoric. There's an audio we did several years ago called Thinking Biblically, Speaking Secularly. And what we did was we point to the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul did not go out and quote the Bible everywhere he went. When he was on Mars Hill in Acts 17, he looked around him and said, "Hey, I see one of your idols over here says to the unknown God, and I see the inscription that you've got here. And, your own Cretan poets have said," and he starts quoting their things and their poets and their writings and uses it to get his message out by quoting their things. And Paul only used the scriptures when he was standing inside the synagogue. I think there were 13 times he addressed crowds in the book of Acts. And when he was in the synagogue, he used the scriptures. When he was outside of the synagogue, he used their rhetoric, their language, the things that were around them. And that's what Dr. Piper's suggestion here is, that we engage in that kind of, don't use our rhetoric, use their rhetoric, and bring them over to our position by using their rhetoric.
A lot of wisdom in that, and it's something that we need to be teaching as well, because, as I was listening to him say that, I was like, man, I wish I knew how to do that. I want to learn how to do that. And he does cover a lot of that in his book, and just talking about what classical liberalism truly is, and especially when you're dealing with professors and teachers and these boards of education and the folks that are in that arena, it works extremely well with them.
Well, and one of the bottom lines that we just always teach kids when we would do apologetics or debate, one of the first questions that you have to ask is, what do you mean by what you are saying? You always have to get them to define their terms, but once you define those terms, like Everett Piper was saying, well, if this is what the term means, this is how you define the term, then let's use it that way. And so that ought to be one of the first things that we ought to be doing in some of these discussions is, you know what, hey, I'm on board with you. Can you explain what this means? And then as you find out what it means, you're able to take the actual meaning of the word and use the terms the way they were written, the way they're intended, and the way that they are explained, instead of just taking one notion and twisting it out of context. This really does go back to this notion of logic and common sense of as Christians, we need to be intelligent. We need to have some logic applied to this. And part of it comes by understanding what it is we are discussing, how we're using it, and then ask some questions with that, which really for some of these professors would be a novel notion. They really don't have to deal with a lot of explaining what they believe. They're just pushing such an agenda. But if we're able to come back and have some intelligent and intellectual conversation, it really can change these discussions.
And notice, too, that for Paul to be able to address the groups, he had to know what they believed and what they thought. He didn't run from that. He went out and learned it and then used that to communicate with them. And one of the things that we often do is we don't want to be informed in arguments on the other side. But the only way you're going to address that is to know that. And by the way, that's one of the things that we're able to do when we do history standards now. One of the ways that we can teach the good, the bad, and the ugly is we can raise questions about other things. Just to give you an example. One of the things that happens in the new Common Core AP U.S. history test that they've done, and I say Common Core because College Board does it. They've said they're going to use Common Core standards, and so they do the AP history test for the advanced placement for the brightest, best kids. And it went from a 5-page document now to a 142-page document in which they tell you exactly what you have to teach in the course. And so as it goes through, they have removed all military battles, all military heroes, all military commanders. They're all gone. If you go to World War II, there is no Hitler, there is no Holocaust, there is no D-Day, there's no Battle of Midway, there is no Battle of the Bulge, there is no Dwight D. Eisenhower, there is no General George S. Patton, there's no General MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur's not there, no Chester Nimitz. All those guys are gone. But the one thing they do teach you about World War II is that we dropped an atomic bomb on Japan, which raised questions about American values. Now, that's what they say. That's the only part of World War II we're going to cover, is that we dropped an atomic bomb and that raised questions about American values. Okay, let's talk about the American values for a moment. There was going on, and by the way, most folks don't have a clue. If you ask most folks, let me just try it to you guys. If I ask you how many people died in World War II, what would you say? What's your answer?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. 1 million? 600,000?
Okay. What do you think, Tim?
Well, it depends on how we define died in World War II, because I know what
died
Hitler
as a result of World War II. Died as a direct result of World War II.
All sides?
All sides.
And are we including the Jews and other people?
That's a direct result of World War II. The Holocaust.
Oh, yeah.
Without World War II and the Holocaust, you don't have that death of the Jews.
Yeah, now you're talking, what, 10 or 12, 15?
All right, 10, 12, 15 million. All right. Is that... Tim, you in the same range?
I was going upside. I was going to say 15 to 20 million, somewhere in that range, I would guess.
The most conservative estimates put it at 60 million.
Wow.
60 million. 40 million in the European theater and 20 million in the Pacific theater. So 40 million, and a lot of that happened on the American side. So many of our casualties came because we had D-Day and said, we're going to push the Nazis right out of these countries. We're going to liberate these countries, give them back. And so as we push through country after country at high cost, like the Battle of the Bulge, so many places with high cost, we finally end up in Germany. We retake Germany. Hitler's gone. He commits suicide. Other of his high-ranking officials commit suicide. Others are executed in war crimes trials. But nonetheless, we get it done. We free that. Then we say, Europe surrendered, but we still have the Japanese who have not surrendered. We're going to have to do the same thing. We're going to have to march into Japan, and we're going to have to take Japan back to crush what's going on there. So we prepare for what's called Operation Downfall. It was D-Day in Europe, but it's Operation Downfall over in Japan. And all the Allied forces that we have, Spain was on our side, and France was on our side, and Britain's on our side, and all these Allied forces, they all give estimates, and the estimate to invade Japan with Allied forces was that it would be probably 4 to 5 million Allied deaths of Allied troops. The American estimates were 500,000 American deaths. And on the Japanese side, it would be between 5 and 10 million Japanese who would be killed, depending on how strongly they resisted the invasion or how much they wanted to get the war over or whatever. So you're looking at anywhere between 4 and 15 million deaths to invade Japan. Right? At that point, Harry Truman says, that's an easy decision. Let's drop 2 atomic bombs. So we drop a bomb on Nagasaki. We drop a bomb on Hiroshima. As a result, 150,000 folks die as a result of those bombs. 150,000 more die as a result of radiation. So you have 300,000 who die as a result of the Americans dropping those 2 bombs. Now, let's talk about the American values that are called into question. We have just reduced from 5 to 15 million deaths to 300,000 deaths. We reduced 4 to 5 million Allied deaths to 0 Allied deaths. We reduced 5 to 10 million Japanese deaths to 300,000 Japanese deaths. Tell me what values we called into question here? What are we talking about? Oh, by the way, I think we rebuilt both of those cities and that nation. I think we gave it all back to them. We didn't keep anything. And by the way, they're now one of the most economically prosperous and free nations in the world. I think that's American values. But you see, you can't argue that if you don't know that side. And that we've got to learn that kind of stuff to be able to push back and say, so you as a liberal don't think that truth is important, and you don't think it's important to know all sides of the debate, right? And they're not going to admit to that.
Yeah, when you make them the ones that are censoring. Oh,
that's
man.
right. That's right. That's right. And that's what, what Dr. Piper says is exactly right. And I tell you what, the way history is supposed to be done, just to be real blunt about it, is you should not, when you read the standards, you should not be able to tell the political perspective of the person who wrote the standards, because history is just a matter of facts. And when it gets done, you should have the facts that are the good, the bad, the ugly. Should not have any indication of any indoctrination or philosophy that's present in the standards, because it's nothing more than a recitation of what's happened in history. But that's not what's happened in schools like, and by the way, Colorado's not unique. That's going on in public schools all over the country where they don't want to teach the good. They just want the bad and the ugly.
Well, it can change if people stand up just like these school board members did in Colorado. Yep. and parents that stood with them. There's going to be a lot of battles like this across the country as we reclaim American exceptionalism and fight things like Common Core. Our listeners out there are doing a great job of doing it across the country. If you're in one of these battles, please email us. Let us know about it so we can highlight it here on the program. You can send that email to radio@wallbuilders.com. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
We stand undivided.